Blog Talk Radio.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right on Coffee Party Radio. I hope you all had a wonderful week. This was a great week in some regards, a not-so-great week in other regards. What do you think? Remember, folks, this is a call-in show. Give me a call at 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. So what are we going to talk about? I had several topics that I was going to talk about today. First, I was going to talk about Elizabeth Warren because that is what my post on the front page of Daily Coast that we'll be dropping at, I think it's 6:30 Central Standard Time tomorrow on the front page of Daily Coast. But I decided that the Iraq issue was so hot and several things were happening with it that I better leave that for the coffee party, not for the coffee party, but for Politics Done Right on Monday on KPFT 90.1 in Houston. Of course, you can stream that as well wherever you are. But for now, we are going to be talking Iraq. But before we get into Iraq, I'd like to give my constant, or not my constant, but little bit of information here as far as it concerns people. So why don't we ever really get ahead? Why do people have a problem getting ahead? Why? When I say getting ahead, I mean getting ahead politically. I mean getting ahead in movement. The reason why is somewhat simple, and yet many times rather pathetic. We have a whole lot of groups that really, really want to do good, but many times in the process of doing good, some within the movement forget eyes on the ball. If you are in groups like Common Cause, what's the ball? If you're in groups like Move to Amend, what is the ball? If you're in groups like Free Speech for the People, what is the ball? The ball is never the individuals making up the organizations. The ball is, what are we going to do to make society better for everyone? That should always be one's goal. Whenever you take your eyes off the ball and you become narcissistically believe, and you have a narcissistic belief that it's more about your group, or more about you, or more and not the American people, that group, that person, that individual, can never survive. Let's put it the way it will be. Individuals of that type will never survive in the movement. Why? All these movements that are middle-class centric movements that are there to support the people, not astroturf people, but really the people. will always consume those that take their eye off the ball. In that light, let's move on to the great things that are happening, specifically. Our left and right wings finally agreeing on something. No more war in Iraq. Could this be true? Could there really be some sort of consensus building between the left and the right? Folks, that seems to be the case. And in my blog post, I have a couple of grammar errors. I wrote it pretty quickly. I'll fix that later on. But that seems to be the case. And this week's hero is none other than Fox News Megyn Kelly, who showed a semblance of journalism in spurts. More so than the liberal media, and I put liberal media in quotations, she asked a tough question, or not a tough question. She asked a few tough questions, including questions against the vice president. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? So let's talk about Iraq today. Let's remind ourselves why we must never make that mistake again. And let me read what I wrote on Megyn Kelly earlier this week. This is what I said. And by the way, we are going to have another subject. I have another young man who wants to talk about whether we need a constitutional amendment, a move to amend, a constitutional amendment, a We the People amendment, to modify the Constitution to say that money is not speech and corporations are not people. So we are going to get to my special guest. I think he's here already, but we'll talk about that subject as well. In fact, before I read the blog on Iraq, let me see if this is him so that we can make sure he has time on his schedule to hold out to the first part on Iraq. Is this happen to be Bobby?
Yes, how you doing, everybody? Bobby Rodrigo, driving around in Atlanta on a Saturday afternoon.
Driving around in Atlanta. Well, Bobby, I'm actually starting on Iraq. Do you have time to listen in until we get to, I know there's a subject on your mind with a lot of the other movements that you're working with, specifically now with whether you still support the constitutional amendment, the We the People amendment. Do you have some time to stick around?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bobby. Anyhow, folks, this is what I said. What is going on at Fox News? And by the way, I titled it Fox News Megyn Kelly Gets It Right as She Slams the Dick Chaney Revisionist History. What is going on at Fox News? Did they actually implicitly defend President Obama? It seems that was the case this week, as Megyn Kelly really excoriated Dick Chaney for his Wall Street Journal op-ed, where he stated the following, and this guy is great to state this. Rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much, too many times to count. Mr. Obama has told us he is ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as though wishing made it so. His rhetoric has now come crashing into reality. Watching the black-clad ISIS jihadists take territory only secured by American blood is final proof. If any were needed, that America's enemies are not decimated. They are emboldened and on the march. Funny. Not even Fox News Megyn Kelly, a part of the right-wing misinformation machine, was taken aback by Dick Chaney. She was very blunt with him. In your op-ed, you write as follows: rarely has a president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many, Megyn Kelly said. But time and time again, history has proven that you got it wrong as well in Iraq, sir. You said there was no doubt Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You said we would be greeted as liberators. You said the Iraq insurgency was in its last throes back in 2005. And you said that after our intervention, extremists would have to, quote, rethink their strategy of jihad. Now, with almost $1 trillion spent, there with 4,500 American lives lost there, what you say to those who say you were so wrong about so much at the expense of so many? Parisians. In a few sentences, Kelly of Fox News encapsulated Dick Cheney's entire failed Iraq policy. In a few sentences, she makes his entire op-ed moot. So how did Dick Cheney respond? He said he fundamentally disagreed with her statement. Fundamentally disagreeing with a fact is tantamount to disagreeing with the earth being virtually a sphere. It shows his lack of honesty and the ability to feel shame. When Fox News gets something right like they did here, it makes one wonder, why would they push back on Cheney? It is rather simple. Most Americans now know Cheney took us into unnecessary war on false premises. If Dick Cheney becomes a story, it does nothing but elevate President Obama when a comparison of Dick Cheney and to a lesser extent President Bush is placed into context side by side. I see Bobby put his hands up. Bobby, what's up?
You know, I didn't know you were going to be talking about this today, and I am so glad that you're raising this point. I think that my reasoning about being so glad might not be totally the same as yours, but I can tell you this. They talked about this on Mar last night, if you didn't catch it. They had Glenn Greenwald on, which was pretty interesting.
Yes, I saw it, but I didn't watch it in detail. I was in some other calls as well, but I'm going to look at it a little later, Bobby. So you're telling me that they were pretty factual on the show last night?
Well, they covered this. They covered this. I kind of agree with what they were talking about last night as to the Megyn Kelly side of it, because, you know, first of all, Fox News is pathetic, but I don't give them. As you know, I don't give any of them a pass. We get lied to by them all, and I know people who have worked for them all. And, you know, Amber Lyon, I throw out there right away with CNN, catching these organizations working with the White House, no matter which White House, and lying or disinformation or not telling us the full truth on anything. So I put that in there, but I'll tell you this, that the Republican Party, as you know, Dick Cheney comes from one side of the Republican Party now that is pretty much fractured into almost three or four sections. Cancer lost because somebody ran against the war machine and intervention.
Bobby, you said something important. Bobby, we are an informational show here, and you said something important that I think you need to expand before you go further on our to our audience. Explain what you mean by that 3 to 4 part fracturing.
Well, you have, for example, you have the Rand Paul, Justin Amott. Well, you have Rand Paul's non-interventionist approach, where he actually has some crossover with the progressive side, and he has some liberty side, even though I call him Trick Liberty actually. But he has some liberty rhetoric as far as following the Constitution, and then of course he's also Mitch McConnell's advisor, which is why I call him Trick Liberty. But then you have somebody like Justin Amash who wants industrial hemp, who doesn't want us in war, and then you have the neocons like McCain, and then Cantor, for example, who are all about Halliburton and the war machine and intervention McCain actually wanted to expand the presidential powers just in January, even more than what they did, than what they have already under Nixon and under Bush. He wanted to give more power for the president to make it easier for him to go to Syria. He said that on the floor of in front of the Senate committee when they were considering.
Let me stop you there. I need to stop you there because Americans need to understand this. There were twofold reasons why McCain did that. One is to support his friends in the military-industrial complex, and two, it was because he wanted to isolate his members, the members of his party, from any interventionist actions that later on they would have to pay at the polls. In other words, they were willing to give the president this power so that it was the president who had to own up to provide it to military action. So he served two purposes. He was able to give the monies to his military-industrial complex with contracts for war again, and at the same time, he was able to isolate the Republican Party from a new war. Continue, Bobby.
Yeah, and I think that definitely was part of the strategy. But I have to tell you, if there's one disappointment that the left can have about President Obama is that he's Bush when it comes to warmongering. And the only reason why we didn't wind up in Syria in the first place, in my view, is because the public spoke out so heavily. Because if you remember, before Obama said that he was going to go to Congress, the Chaney, and literally Dick Chaney said this, Obama should go to Congress before he goes to Syria. And then when he decided to go, Chaney, among others, said he just weakened the presidency. It's the circular game that they play. But do not give the Democrats a pass on warmongering because their votes on the Iraq war and the insurgency and stuff are clear and that they are duplicit. I mean, even Hillary Clinton said it in her book. She made a mistake. Well, I'm sorry, but Bill and Hillary, Bill was almost as much a warmongering push. So,
Bobby, I want to correct you on something, my friend. Nobody gives any warmonger a pass, whether Democratic or Republican, and you're absolutely correct. But do remember, there is a left wing of the Republican Party, and now with with what we're talking about today, a right wing of the Republican Party. And guess what? They both, in this particular issue, want to ensure that not one more drop of American blood goes ahead and be spilled in Iraq. So there is some consensus right there. Continue, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is this all goes back. The reason that they call people isolationists, non-interventionists, but, it really boils down to an interpretation of the Constitution, which we'll get into another one later, but the interpretation that the military is for defending our country. And, this is ridiculous what's going on. If you remember, I recommend everybody, and I'm not in front of a computer to put it up in the chat room, but I recommend that everybody go to Storm Cloud's Gathering website and look at a post that they just did about the timeline of Iraq all the way back to 1980, and it showed, and they do it. I try. You have to. I think it's .org. I think it's .org, but I can't. I just in my car, But
right.
It was a marvelous piece. They did a video and they wrote it as well. So you can read it or watch it. It's about 15 minutes long, and they do a timeline and they cross-reference with documents from the Department of Defense, with other stories that were factual covering this whole time period, and how we have essentially caused this whole thing from all kinds of directions. I mean, if it goes all the way back to 80, you're talking about Reagan, Bush. Remember, anybody who doesn't, I'll offer it. Remember the woman who was the part of the diplomatic team who actually went in front of Congress and told them that Saddam Hussein was killing babies by taking the incubators in the Kuwait War, and it was completely false. But it raised the ire of our to get the support of the war. So now they're doing the same thing. Everything that they do is like, we want to go to war, we want to go to war. Remember, we're out of wars. We're coming out of Afghanistan, so we need something else except for the black ops and for the drones going on with this country. There you go. And it's crazy. We need to stop warring, and us as a society, in my view, needs to stand up, just like we did with the Syria thing, and raise Cain about it. And I don't care who you don't like, it doesn't matter. We need to stop warring totally. It's ridiculous.
Bobby,
we have no business.
We're doing it, brother. We are doing it. If you take a look at Rachel Maddow, and I'm coming to you next, John. Great piece to go. About the issues. I something. Rachel is very, very, and as a, it's my responsibility to give people comfort, good information, but they want. I take these videos and I insert them with the most important snippets. And this was a real long, complicated video that she did that I'm still working on. But I normally do this stuff in half hours, so this one is going to take me a couple hours. But I'm going to put it out there. But look here, stay with me, Bobby. I'm going to throw in John here from San Antonio, my dear friend John from San Antonio. Come on in, my brother. How you doing today?
Yeah, good, Egberto. Good afternoon. I just want to take the aspect of Iraq from three different views. I mean, one perspective is just talking about the actual involvement, the American involvement in Iraq and how that's shaping up. Also, I'd like to address the actual debunking of all the war enthusiasts, and you all know who they are, Chaney, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, and everything like that. Right. And and also, one thing that I don't hear you talking about that I think is an important aspect of this is just, everybody's just talking about the American angle. And I understand that, because this is what's going to affect us all. But, I mean, I don't want to sound too much like I did during the Syria conversation. But, I mean, we can't just ignore what's going on over there. I mean, we can have a larger conversation about how America should deal with terrorist organization. And I'm definitely in the camp that thinks that, the whole thing is overblown to support the military complex. But at the same time, there is a threat, and what is happening is news. And like when Chris Hayes opened on his show last night, he was talking about what was actually going on in Iraq and how ISIS was ruling. And I think that we shouldn't just ignore that aspect of it and just be all American centric and just think about how it's affecting Americans. As far as I
want to first give before you go further, John. I need to give you some very heavy kudos on that statement, because as the largest country, the most powerful country in the world, there are a lot of people within smaller countries that are looking for help when there is a monster attacking them, etc., etc., etc. And there are ways to do that. So first of all, kudos for bringing that up. That we shouldn't be completely and entirely self-centered, but I don't think neither myself or Bobby that's where we're at. But please continue, my friend.
Okay. So anyway, as far as talking about the military function, and y'all are talking about polling, and what you said is correct. I mean, most of the polling that has come out, shows that a majority of Americans, 76% in the PP poll, 80% in the Reuters poll, don't want people in combat. Now, what Obama has done, sending the 300 people who could possibly be in combat. I mean, this is what a lot of veterans are talking about. They say if they're there and they're in the front lines and they're getting information, they are experiencing combat. And though they say they're training, if you're in a firefight, the special forces aren't just going to retreat; they're going to fire back. And so, essentially, 300 people are going to be in combat. And so now, when you talk about whether that is supported, and this is all the people that are going to be coming in. This is going to be a precursor for drone strikes and bombing. And so, then you go in a little bit different opinion. I mean, some of these the polls that I have seen, like Rasmussen, which always oversamples Republican, says that 46% of the people support military airstrikes, and only 22 are against. and the Yuga, which also isn't a very good poll, but I mean, that's all we got. Say it's 22% are for, 48 are for, and 30 are against. So a majority do support airstrikes, and so I guess what I want to
not a majority. No. That's not a majority. That's a plurality. Big difference.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, but yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of people don't give an opinion, but it is 18 points of for the difference is 18 points and one and 16 points in another, or 14 points in another. So I guess I'm against airstrikes also, but I guess I want to hear what your reaction to what people are saying about actual airstrikes, because that's really more realistic about what's going to happen. Because I don't think there will be.
I'll give you my answer quickly. I am against airstrikes, and not only am I against airstrikes. While I take homage to what you say about we can't look at it only from an American angle, we have to look at it from the angle of the people in Iraq as well. And there's something that I've heard many people say, and that is, you can't want freedom or democracy more for people than they do. Okay? Now, when we went in, we were wrong for going into Iraq in the first place. We were wrong to topple that dictatorship, because that there is some reality to that. If you don't have a buy-in in your own democracy, then you will never be able to keep it. We will have to keep it for you. They will become our 51st state. And I don't mean that to sound facetious or anything like that. What I mean is the small amount of people that toppled these different cities from ISIS, small amount of armed people that toppled this, only did that because there wasn't any kind of resistance to it. I do believe if people want to bring resistance to this type of a life and they want some help, we should. But just as bad as it was for us to get into Iraq in 2003, it would be wrong for us to get in now. Now, we always have this statement that if we break it, we must fix it. That is not a very realistic statement. I understand what it means, but the reality is nobody's hands or fingers are clean either. Neither the U.S. nor Iraq. We can go, we can try to play the purity game for a very long time. The reality is at some point we have to reach a point of equilibrium. And I think the point of equilibrium to be reached is right now. The only thing that we are protecting right now is cheap oil prices. Believe it or not, them blowing up a few refineries in Iraq and causing the price of oil to go up may not be all a bad thing. And I'd like to bring Bobby in, but before that, I'd like you to respond to that. Because you know what? We need some oil shocks to let folks realize that oil is not going to be our savior. We need to really start working on all these things we've been talking about for years. Go ahead, my friend.
Well, I don't mean to dwell on this too much, but I think you're kind of missing the human angle. The human angle is you got Sunnis there. I mean, some of them are so fed up with Maliki and the way Maliki's governed that they're willing to accept ISIS. Other massive refugees who went to the Kurdistan and the north, by the hundreds of thousands, don't want to have anything to do with ISIS because they don't want to be, lashed or beheaded because of, not following Sharia law to that particular person's degree. So, I mean, the human angle is important. And so it's just a tragedy. It's a tragedy, when people put religion so far ahead of everything, and when the people in ISIS and Al Qaeda and the Taliban and other members, whether it's Sunni, those are all Sunni groups, but or Shias who are that extreme to their extreme aspect of Islam.
John, but help me, please, John, help me help me here, because I hear when you say maybe I'm not sufficiently looking at the human angle. I am admitting here I am lost. I don't know that us, as an example, a lot of times we go in to save a democracy. We went into Iraq originally to save a democracy, and we killed more people than Saddam killed. I mean, I don't know. I really, honestly don't know. And when I don't know what to do, I do nothing, or I just try to cover the pain. So I'm asking everybody, call in 646-929-2495. What do we do? Tell me, John, what would you do?
Well, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have went into Iraq. I mean, that was a terrible folly that we were lied into.
What would you do now?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bomb. I mean, in saying that we're not going to bomb, I guess our options are really not to do anything. I mean, between even bombing, if we do bomb, which seems very likely, we're going to get massive propaganda put up by ISIS, and we're seeing all these mutilated bodies, and there will be a tremendous amount of casualties. Collateral damage, I guess, is the term that they use, and that's happened all over the world from drone strikes. And you have to say, is it worth it? But on the other hand, it's terrible for all these people to be under this law, under ISIS, who is awful. So there is no good solution, really. I mean, I'm a person who thinks that the U.S. is really tried to be an imperial power, in post-World War II too often. But, I mean, at the same time, you can't, I love Marr, I think he's great, but sometimes he's just a little bit too cynical. I mean, just say kind of the Sarah Palin outlook is let Allah sort them out, and let them, kill each other. No, we have to try to get them to form a peaceful solution. I mean, this is possible. Look at the Irish, with the Protestants and the Catholic. They were at each other's throats for years, and but eventually, they got over it, and the killing stopped. Mostly. And so, I mean, I just hope that somehow that can happen again. But the picture does look very bleak. And so,
yes, it does.
That's just
Let's
reality.
Bring Bobby into the conversation. Let's bring Bobby in. Bobby, what you think?
The first thing I'll say is that I totally appreciate the human angle of this. I actually had a discussion with somebody just recently because they were doing the sound bites about, the left was complaining about the right's criticism of Benghazi. And so they brought out all these people that died at embassy attacks during the Bush years. And the response from the right was, well, none of them were Americans. And I'm like, what the hell difference does that make? Why are only Americans dying what matter here? So I totally agree with the human angle. My problem with all of this is, while I am confused about solutions, like both of you are, is that our history, and John mentioned the imperialist side of our military industrial complex is World War II. Great statement. Phenomenally correct, and Oliver Stone did The Untold Story of America about that very thing, and everybody should watch it that ever wants to know what we do in our country. We are replete with, we caused this, partially at least, and even if you take away the fact that we went to Iraq, which is so huge in this, we are arming the moderate factions of the rebels in Syria, and they're doing military exercises with the extremist ones. So if they're getting their hands on the weapons, just that aspect of it. Saddam Hussein used to be our ally when in the Iraq-Iran war. Now we're talking about Iran being our ally in this situation against ISIS. We want Assad gone. We just did it to Libya. We just did it to we propped up Mubarak for decades, and now we helped that go away, and not the way that we're doing this now. Why are we involved in all of this? We're causing the majority of it. So I guess if there's going to be a solution, my input would be is, first, let's be honest about what's going on here. John mentioned the Taliban. We created the Taliban with our hatred of communism. Ronald Reagan armed them, basically created Osama bin Laden. We know our ally Saudi Arabia is duplicit in all of that. We know about the Iran-Contra thing, or again, our hatred of communism, Vietnam, our hatred of communism. Now it's our hatred of radical or Islam or whatever, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's what's going on.
Yeah, that is sad. And the thing about it, and like John alluded to, what do we do about it? I think I have Jack here. I need to get Jack in a little bit. So, Jack, I'm coming to you right now. Jack, do you want to add a little quick to the topic?
All right. Yes. The thing is, if it was not mentioned by either one of you, the two Pauls, Paul Wolfowitz and Paul Bremer, and they should never have been hired in the first place. And we wouldn't have had the Iraq War going on. And I agree that Saddam Hussein had to go. Okay. He's anti-Semitic, among other things. But past that time, that should have ended. They should have pulled the troops out of Iraq in 2004. Okay, I disagree with that Saddam Hussein should have been saved. But other than that, the two Pauls should not have been hired.
I take your comment. You're absolutely correct, Jack. I got to run to 713, but you're correct, Jack. 713, come on in. Who do I have the honor of speaking with?
Hey, Berta, this is Michelle.
Hey, Michelle, talk to me.
Hey, I just read an article, and they were talking about Robert Kagan, and he had written this lengthy article, The New Republic, Superpowers Don't Get to Retire. What our tired country still has in the world. The thing of it is, to me, one thing we can do is on a local level, on a national level, we get to decide who's in office. We get to decide who the decision makers are. I think we need more people with more intelligence and less spin in those decision-making positions. And we have that power. And we need to engage in our government. We need to vote. I mean, we need to do our research on these people. We need to make sure that whoever's in office has the ability to draw on intelligent people, people with experience, and not just this crony capitalist, crazy Republican GOP out there wackos.
I want to stop you there.
I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there.
No, but before you, I need to say one thing. This is Michelle Michon, and she's talking about us having to engage politically. As you guys know, my motto is always political engagement should be a requirement for citizenship, and I live by that tenet. And Michelle Michon, she has a whole lot of Facebook pages where she engages people to do that. It's something that is inspiring and something we all should do. The Texas Women Alliance, right? Did I get that right this time?
Texas Women's Action Committee, TWAC, Texas Women's Action Committee. We need to do a name change on Facebook. You can find us Texas Women Coalition. That's something, I still have to file the paperwork and make it all,
Right, but
I'm not collecting any money, so I'm not really worried about it.
She has thousands and thousands of followers, so she is doing her part as far as engaging people, and that statement that she makes there about we have to start at the local level, making sure. Right now we have somebody that's running against Ted Poe who has been an ideologue, and I'm not talking about We Coffee Party. I'm talking about our local organizations here in Kingwood, Texas. So, this is something that can be and should be replicated throughout the country. I also want to give a shout-out to AATTP that I just started writing a few articles for that, and you can get there at aattp.org, where we're writing, in my case, I'm ensuring that we write articles that educate Americans, not just flame Americans, but educate Americans on several issues going forward. Before we get into the other subject that me and Bobby are going to be talking about, and I know John is going to engage in as well. And Michelle, before I go, do you have anything else you want to add to what you said?
No, I just wanted to throw that in there. I mean, we don't have we are experts in foreign policy, and that's something that's highly complex. And, but it's up to us to hire the people, basically, in our government who do, who have the ability and enough smart to hire the people that do know.
Exactly.
We employ them. It's like, Molly Ivins says, we hire the bus driver. This is our bus.
Absolutely. I love that phrase. Molly was a great woman, wasn't she?
Absolutely. We miss her dearly.
Absolutely. Anyhow, let me tell you, while I'm giving some kudos, I should have given kudos to wholehearted, hard-working Rodrigo, who is working with, what's the name of the group, Bobby? ND, always get it wrong.
It's People Against the NDAA, PANDA.
PANDA, that's right. People Against the NDAA.
People Against the NDAA, the Detention Provision of the NDAA. It is, in my view, the worst law that's ever been written.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, folks, I think we're pretty much done with Iraq. There's nothing we're going to solve on any one day in us. But what we hope to do here is to tell folks, do your part to ensure that our government, and notice I didn't say the politicians, but our government, act appropriately in this issue. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or other. Make sure your guy does the right thing. Bobby, now, I have a bone to pick with you, buddy. Move to Amend. Move to Amend is the premier group that is building a big, large, multi-ethnic coalition that is not going to only work towards the modification of the Constitution to ensure that corporations are not people and money is not speech, but also build a movement where Americans retake their democracy. What's the problem with that, Senor Rodrigo?
Well, my answer is threefold. First of all, I must tell everybody who don't know that Move to Amend is one of the best educational sources for the history in this country of corporate personhood that I've ever seen. Their research is phenomenal, accurate, of course, which is why it's phenomenal, and available on the website, which is, of course, where I saw it. And I commend the organization for that, without a doubt. My problem with the constitutional amendment is the Constitution is not the problem, as it's not the problem in so many other areas, in my view, and in many people's. And I'll give you an example of it, where I'm coming from. We were talking about the indefinite detention provision of the NDAA. So I'm going to use that in the Patriot Act as great examples of how the Constitution is not the problem. The problem is our legislators and our executive and the black robes believe that what they do, no matter what it is what's going to be allowed. That's the problem. The Patriot Act, by its very language, and for those who have not read it recently, please go read it and follow along with me, because it's very important. We all know that the Constitution, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, were put in place to grant us to give us constitutional protection of rights that we already had. That was the entire approach of this. We are not given rights by the government. We had them, and the government is embodied to protect these, and they cannot do anything with them unless they follow the procedures that are laid out in the Constitution. So it's very simple. If you're going to be arrested, you have to be charged by indictment or probable cause that must exist. You are to be given an opportunity of reasonable bail. You are to be afforded due process before you can lose life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Sixth Amendment guarantees you the right to counsel. The Ninth Amendment protects every other right that's not listed in the first 10 Bill of Rights because they didn't want to make it too long. I mean, that's really how you can look at it. The Patriot Act, by its very wording, says if you want to get surveillance on anybody that you want because you think that they're whatever they are, doesn't matter really what the definition is, you no longer are required to get probable cause or to have due process in doing it. You can just go do it. They took the FISA court, which was a secret court already created in 1978, but kept the due process and the probable cause aspects of getting warrants for searches or getting warrants for surveillance. The very wording in the Patriot Act removes those safeguards because they legislated it, not because it's constitutional. It's the same thing they did with you can now take money from people and you don't need to go through the due processes of what you had to before. And then you move that forward to the indefinite detention provision of the NDAA. Now, for those who don't know what this law is, it's very simple what's going on here. The First Amendment protects our right to petition the government for redressals of grievances, number one. That means access to the courts, among other things. Number two, the Fourth Amendment says you must have probable cause, search and seizure. And, of course, that requires due process. The Fifth Amendment, we've already covered. The Sixth Amendment, we've already covered. The Eighth Amendment requires our protection for being no cruel and unusual punishment. How many more do I need to name? The indefinite detention provision of the NDAA says that our government can take anybody, including anybody in this country, on soil in this country, and put them, the military, who also is not allowed to act like this per the Constitution. The military can come and take you and I, because we're belligerent, because the definitions are broad. This isn't about some kind of definition of terrorism. It's belligerent is the word they use. They can take us and they can put us in a detention facility, not charge us, not give us a bail, not bring us before a judge, not give us a lawyer, and not let us out for as long as they feel like it. Now, how is the Constitution the problem with that scenario? It's not, in my view. So what we have here, look, the United States Constitution does not grant corporate personhood, not in any way, shape, or form. It does not protect corporations. The Bill of Rights are for the individual. As the move to amend correctly teaches us, that was created in a room in the Supreme Court when the issue wasn't even before them, when they decided to make it that way. What a marvelous piece of research that they put out there for people to realize. The United States Constitution does not say that money is speech. Of course not. The reason that us who are against messing with the Constitution is we don't believe that the Constitution is the problem. We believe that it's the legislators that are the problem, which Move to Amend agrees with, because your second part of what they're doing is they're creating a movement that wants to make Washington accountable and remove money from politics. And you know I am on board with that full bore. But I don't know if you've seen the Liberty Amendments by Mr. Levin, which to me are literally insane, and all of the other possibilities that happen, or if people fully understand the process of what happens, both for either a con or the other constitutional convention that happens for changing the Constitution, and the proposals that are possibly out there, and how possibly easy it is, much easier than people believe, that it could happen. I prefer to fix what we have. I wish we would just take the Constitution and take it out for a spin and kick the tires, and let's see how it works for a month. Just give me a month of a constitutional government where the Congress has to declare war, and we just read the language as what it is, and we can argue about some gray areas. We can argue about the Second Amendment meaning militia or a person, fine. But the rest of it, there's no gray area there. The Third Amendment.
Let me tell you, Bobby. Let me get in a bit and say a few things here. First of all, I'm not a constitutional expert, as I always confess when I come on the show. But secondly, Move to Amend sole purpose. Yeah, we want a 28th Amendment to specify those two things, and the reason we want to specify that is that the personhood went through the entire cycle. Okay, in other words, it was brought through the legislative they sued, the corporation sued, and the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution, the Supreme Court, says they were persons. So the only way to mitigate what the Supreme Court has said is to put out a constitutional amendment. It doesn't care that we already believe that the Constitution says that. Since they have interpreted portions not to say that, it is then our responsibility to have a assertive statement that in fact corporations or legal entities are not people. Now I want to go a little bit further because I think you said you like a lot of the writings from Move to Amend. We have a good team, legal writers that actually write these documents that probably half of it I don't understand, if not more. But
we looked at
one of the interesting you know what I mean. We look at it, but hey,
we looked at it. We took it apart, put it back together, and we have opinions about your proposed amendment as well as how much teeth it has, etc. But go on. I just want to let you know we looked at it really hard.
That's good, and I know that you did. Panda, what's the young man's name at Panda?
It's not just Panda. With there is a movement called Defend Not Amend, which I had mentioned to you before. I was defending the Coffee Party against them, literally, because they were trying to say it was co-opted by big money. They also tried to say that about Move to the Patriot Coalition is your biggest advocate.
You know, I get a whole lot of paperwork, Bobby. I get a lot of paperwork. Send me that again. I'd love to see that and take it to the.
Sure. No, I will. Absolutely.
But anyhow,
let me just make one quick comment from what you said before you go on. Just one quick comment. The reason I gave you the examples that I did is because it shows how the Constitution is not the problem, and they do it anyway. I get the fact that the black robes said what they said. I don't believe the black robes are the ultimate interpretation of the Constitution. I believe we are because it says what it says. But putting that aside, I gave you an example of the Constitution says that we have due process. The legislators went and said, no, we don't. Now, how is the Constitution a problem in that regard? So I understand where you're coming from totally, and I agree that money should be out of politics, but the Constitution doesn't grant it, even though they're morons up in sorry for the instability, but even though those black robes decided they wanted to do this, we all know our government is corrupt right now in every way. I'm just saying that I gave you two examples that show exactly how the language of the Constitution says one thing, the law says another. So the Constitution is not the problem; it's the law.
But here's the deal: the Constitution says one thing, the law says something else, and who's the arbiter of who's right? The judiciary. I mean, and that's the problem. What I'm saying is,
they didn't do that, and they didn't do that with the NDAA. They didn't do it. They decided to. This is what I'm saying about corruption. The only judiciary branch that decided the merits of the NDAA decided it on our side. A beautiful opinion. And the Second Circuit said that Hedges didn't have standing, and the Supreme Court didn't hear it. Now, so the movement that supports the indefinite detention, like the Lindsey Grahams and the Dianne Feinsteins, because I'm telling you, they both voted for it. So you have both sides there, and our president signed it again. So the movement that supports that says, oh, so it's constitutional. That's not what happened. So, the black robes are not the final say-so here. And I think what Move to Amend is doing is right, but I don't want anybody near the Constitution until they tell me that it's wrong, that it's doing something wrong. That's where I'm coming from.
I really understand your points, and it's taken. I think we're going to keep our split philosophy there, in that I don't think they conflict with each other. In other words, if I'm fighting a war to get this thing through, and as much as you think we don't have to do it, I know I will be able to count on you. Why, John, before we're coming close to the end of the show, why don't you chime in some?
Yeah, I mean, I agree to a large extent with Bobby on this. I think the problem are the laws in many cases. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at all of the constitutional amendments, that have come into place, this is a process that has continually happened in our country. Whether, you talk about all the first 10 amendments, that happened in 1789, or all the other 17 amendments that have come afterwards. I mean, I don't really understand where he's coming from in the fact that, does he think that besides the original amendments, the other ones are not valid? I mean, if you create a constitutional amendment and it it goes to the constitutional criteria, which is 2/3 of a vote in both houses and having a majority of 2/3, I believe, in the House and the individual state houses, and also you can have state conventions and have 2/3 of those. A constitutional amendment will pass, and this has gone on through our history. So I don't know where he's kind of coming from a historical perspective on that.
No, I didn't mean that at all, John. I misstated. If I did, I apologize. No, what I was talking about was the opportunity to add amendments that would be really bad for us by opening up the Constitution in a convention. That's what I meant. I totally agree that we should do it. Yeah.
There's a lot of fear there. We run through that fear with Wolfpack. We went through that fear because Wolfpack is just pushing Article 5, and we have Occupy in Hawaii that's also pushing Title 5. Title 5. So they're quite Article 5. Hear me, Article 5. So there are several out there. But we got to go now, folks. So Bobby, give me a quick 15, 20-second closeout, my friend. I gave you your airspace for your topic.
I appreciate it. Wonderful, as always, participating in a Coffee Party radio show and talking about important events. And John and Egberto always talk about important things, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being here, Bobby. John, or before John, let me go ahead and go to Jack. Come on, Jack, give me a quick 15 seconds.
Okay, still on, that one item hasn't discussed was the 9th and 10th Amendments. And that is excuse for voting suppression and crap like that. And we need to discuss it because nobody knows about the 9th and 10th Amendments, which is state rights. And that should be a topic of discussion. And
you know what? I probably should, do that because we've been talking a lot of state rights. I'm going to do that, Jack. Thank you very much, and I'm going to look that up. Go ahead, John. Give me your closeout.
Yeah, that's a kind of a contentious topic because throughout the history,
means a lot of things.
Yeah, the government is mostly come down on the side, almost exclusively come down on the side of federal law superseding state law, if there is a federal law concerning that particular issue. And so so that's kind of... So anyway, it was a good show. I enjoy it just like I do every week. Do you have who's going to be on your show on KPFT? Are you going to talk about Elizabeth Warren?
On Monday, let me tell you what I'm doing. Monday, I'm going to be talking about the little hoopla that happened between Chris and Elizabeth Warren, Chris Matthews and Elizabeth Warren. I really want to go a little deeper into that. So I know you're going to have some of your research done to hit me up with on air.
All right.
I think the people in Houston know who you are, John.
It's a good show. I recommend it to everybody. 9 p.m. Central Time, KPFT. It's had a great role of guest on, and it's a very informative show, just like this show is.
Look, guys, thank you very much for spending another hour with Politics Done Right on Coffee Party Radio. Please come back next week. We'll have another great show for you. Actually, I'm not sure. I may have to get a sub for next week if I don't have the right types of connections at the Democratic convention on Saturday. But I'll let you guys know in due time. But again, thank you very much for being here with us. You have a wonderful Saturday. And remember, folks, we are the one who make this country. The government is not government. The government is we, the people. You have a wonderful day. Coffee party on, as Janine would say. Bye-bye.